There comes a moment every woman feels it, and she doesn't need you to say a word to know something has changed. The energy is different. The attention she once had from you starts to fade. The effort drops. The way you look at her, speak to her, respond to her, it all shifts. And that's when it hits her, you're losing interest. For a man, this might feel like a quiet decision, something internal. But for a woman, it triggers a chain reaction. She starts thinking, questioning, watching. She replays past conversations. She notices the small things you stopped doing. And more importantly, she begins to react, often in ways most men completely misunderstand. Some men assume she will simply walk away. Others think she will chase harder. The truth is more layered than that. A woman's response depends on her emotions, her attachment, her pride, and how much she felt she had with you. What you need to understand is this. When a woman senses your interest fading, her behavior is no longer random. Every move she makes carries meaning. Every silence, every message, every shift in attitude is part of how she processes that loss. If you misread these reactions, you lose control of the situation completely. But if you understand them, you gain a level of awareness most men never reach. In this video, you're going to see exactly how she reacts when she realizes you've lost interest and what that means for you. 1. Pulls back. She doesn't confront you immediately. She watches first, and that distance you feel from her is not confusion, it is calculation. She starts matching your energy in a quiet way. Where she used to respond fast, she now takes her time. Where she used to show excitement, she now gives you neutral reactions. And this is not because she suddenly stopped caring. It is because she is protecting herself from feeling rejected before it becomes obvious. She wants to see if what she is sensing is real or just in her head, so she tests the space between you. She becomes less available, less expressive, less emotionally open, and this is where most men make a mistake. They assume she is losing interest first when in reality she is responding to what she already feels from you, and the more you stay inconsistent, the more she continues to pull back. Because in her mind, she refuses to be the one chasing a man who is slowly stepping away. Her pride steps in. Her self-respect becomes louder than her emotions, and even if she still likes you, she will not give you the same version of herself anymore. You will notice she stops initiating conversations the way she used to. She no longer goes out of her way to keep things alive, and if you go silent, she lets it stay silent longer than before, not because she wants to lose you, but because she wants to see if you will step up. This is her way of measuring your interest without directly asking for it, and at the same time she is emotionally preparing herself for the possibility that you are already checking out. She becomes more observant than ever, paying attention to the smallest details, how often you reach out, how you speak to her, whether your tone has changed, whether you still show curiosity about her life, and every small sign you give gets analyzed, not in an obsessive way, but in a protective one, because she is trying to understand where she stands without exposing her vulnerability too soon. And if your actions keep confirming her fear, she slowly detaches piece by piece, not all at once, but in stages, first emotionally, then mentally, and eventually physically. And here is what you need to understand. When she pulls back like this, she is not gone yet. But she is no longer secure in you. She is shifting from feeling wanted to feeling uncertain, and that uncertainty changes how she behaves with you completely. She becomes less warm, less playful, less invested, and you start to feel that difference, that absence of energy you once had with her. And if you ignore this stage, if you stay distant or careless, she will take it as confirmation that her instincts were right, and once that happens, she will continue pulling back until there is nothing left to hold on to. Because no woman wants to stay in a position where she feels like she is slowly losing a man who is no longer choosing her. So instead of waiting to be fully rejected, she starts stepping away first, quietly, strategically, and without drama. And by the time most men realize what is happening, she is already halfway gone, not because she wanted to leave, but because she felt she had no reason to stay the same way she once did. 2. Tests you. She doesn't always ask direct questions when she feels you slipping. Instead, she creates situations that reveal your intentions without putting herself at risk. She might delay replying just to see if you notice. She might give you less attention to see if you step forward or stay passive. She might even bring up other men in a subtle way just to watch your reaction. Not because she wants them, but because she wants to measure how much you still care. And this is where many men fail without realizing it, because they treat these moments casually when they actually matter a lot. Every small test is her way of asking one silent question: are you still invested in me? And your behavior answers that question more than your words ever could. If you become indifferent, she reads it as confirmation that your interest is fading. If you become overly reactive or insecure, she loses respect because it shows a lack of control. What she is looking for is consistency and presence, a steady signal that you are still there and still value her without forcing it. And when she doesn't get that, the tests become more frequent and sometimes more intense, not because she enjoys it, but because she is trying to remove doubt from her mind. She wants clarity without asking for it directly, and the more unclear you are, the more she feels the need to push for answers through behavior. Sometimes she will act slightly colder just to see if you try to warm things up. Sometimes she will become a bit distant just to see if you close the gap, and if you don't, she begins to emotionally withdraw even more, because in her mind a man who wants her doesn't sit back and let the connection fade. He steps in and maintains it. And this is the key point you need to understand. Her tests are not random games. They are reactions to uncertainty, and uncertainty comes from you, your inconsistency, your reduced effort, your lack of clarity, and when that uncertainty grows, so does her need to figure out where she stands. And if your actions keep failing those silent tests, she stops testing altogether, not because everything is fine, but because she has already made a decision in her mind. She starts accepting that you are no longer as interested. And once she reaches that point, her energy changes completely. She becomes less emotionally available, less responsive, and far less willing to invest in something that feels one-sided. And at that stage, even if you try to correct your behavior, it feels different to her because the consistency was broken, and rebuilding that takes more effort than most men expect. So understand this clearly. When she starts testing you, it is not a problem. It is actually a sign she still cares enough to figure things out. The real problem begins when she stops testing, because that is when she has already started letting go. And most men never see that shift coming because they misunderstand the purpose behind her actions. They think she is being difficult, when in reality she is trying to protect her emotions while still giving you a chance to show that you haven't lost interest completely. 3. Becomes colder. The warmth you once felt from her doesn't disappear overnight. It fades in a way that feels subtle at first, but over time becomes impossible to ignore. She stops giving you that soft energy, that excitement in her voice, that openness in her presence. And instead you start getting shorter replies, less emotional engagement, less enthusiasm, and this shift is not accidental. It is controlled. She is adjusting how much of herself she gives you based on what she feels she is receiving. When a woman senses your interest dropping, she refuses to keep showing up the same way because that would make her feel exposed and undervalued. So she pulls her emotional energy back and replaces it with a more guarded version of herself. She becomes less expressive, less reactive, and more neutral in her behavior. And for a man, this often feels confusing because there is no clear confrontation, no dramatic moment, just a steady change in how she interacts with you. One day she's warm, the next she's distant, and you can't quite pinpoint when it started, but she knows exactly why it happened. In her mind, she is simply matching your level of effort. Nothing more, nothing less, and the more she feels you slipping, the colder she allows herself to become. Not out of spite, but out of self-protection, because staying warm toward someone who feels distant only leads to emotional imbalance, and she refuses to be the one giving more while receiving less. This is where many men misread the situation and think she is losing interest first, but in reality she is responding to what she has already picked up from you, and the coldness you experience is a mirror of your own inconsistency. You may not even realize you changed. Maybe you got comfortable. Maybe you became distracted, maybe you stopped putting in the same effort, but she noticed, and once she notices, she adjusts. She stops initiating as much. She stops asking deeper questions. She stops investing in conversations that feel one-sided, and even when she is present, it feels different, like something is missing. That emotional spark you once had becomes harder to reach, and here is the critical part. Her coldness is not the end. It is a warning. It is the stage where she is still paying attention, still observing, still deciding, but she is no longer fully open. She is testing whether you will recognize the shift and correct it, whether you will step back into your role and bring the energy back. And if you don't, if you remain passive or unaware, that coldness slowly turns into detachment. And once that happens, the connection starts slipping beyond recovery because she no longer feels emotionally safe investing in you. She starts treating the interaction more casually, more distant, and less meaningful, and by the time most men try to fix it, they are no longer dealing with the same version of her. They are dealing with someone who has already started to disconnect. And rebuilding from that point requires more than just temporary effort. It requires consistency, awareness, and a real shift in how you show up. Because once a woman replaces warmth with emotional distance, getting that warmth back is not automatic. It has to be earned again through actions that prove your interest is real and steady, not something that fades the moment you feel comfortable. 4. Seeks validation elsewhere. When she feels your attention slipping, she doesn't always sit in that uncertainty waiting for you to fix it. She starts looking outward, not necessarily to replace you immediately, but to restore the feeling she's losing. She wants to feel seen again, wanted again, appreciated again, and if that isn't coming from you, she becomes more open to receiving it from other places. This can show up in subtle ways. She becomes more active socially. She engages more with people around her. She might start posting more, dressing with more intention, or simply putting herself in spaces where she knows attention exists. And this is not always about other men specifically. It is about regaining a sense of value that feels like it's fading in your connection. Because when a woman feels ignored or taken for granted, it affects her emotionally more than most men realize. She begins to question her position in your life, her importance to you, and instead of sitting in that doubt, she shifts toward environments that remind her she is still desired, still interesting, still worth pursuing. And here is where the situation becomes delicate, because once she starts receiving consistent validation from outside, her dependence on your attention decreases, the emotional weight you once held begins to spread out, and that changes the dynamic completely. She becomes less focused on you, less affected by your behavior, less concerned about your inconsistency. Because she is no longer relying on you for that emotional reassurance, and the more this continues, the easier it becomes for her to detach, because she is no longer feeling a lack. She is filling that space elsewhere, and many men underestimate this stage. They assume she is just being social or trying to make them jealous, but the deeper reality is that she is adapting. She is adjusting to a version of you that feels less present, and instead of chasing you for attention, she redirects her energy to places where it comes naturally, and once that shift happens, it becomes harder to regain her full focus, because now you are no longer the only source of excitement or validation in her world. You are one option among others, and options reduce urgency. They reduce emotional dependency, and they reduce the pressure for her to fight for the connection. And this is the turning point where many connections start to break down, not because of one big mistake, but because of a gradual shift in attention and value. She is no longer waiting for you to show up the way you used to. She is creating a life where your absence is less noticeable. And the more comfortable she becomes in that space, the less motivation she has to reconnect on the same level. And if you try to step back in without understanding this change, it feels off to her, because the dynamic has already evolved. She is no longer in the same emotional position. She has already started redistributing her attention, her time, and her energy, and at that point, rebuilding requires more than just showing interest again. It requires standing out again, because once a woman starts getting consistent validation from outside, She becomes more selective about where she invests deeply. And if your actions don't clearly show that you value her, she won't feel the need to prioritize you the way she once did. 5. Stops chasing. There was a time she met you halfway, or even more than halfway. She initiated conversations, kept things going, checked in on you, made plans, showed effort without hesitation, and you got used to that version of her. But the moment she realizes your interest is no longer where it used to be, that behavior starts to disappear, not suddenly, but intentionally. She begins to hold back. She lets you take the lead more. She waits to see if you will reach out first. And if you don't, she doesn't rush to fill that silence anymore. This is not laziness or a loss of personality. This is a conscious shift in effort, because no woman wants to feel like she is chasing a man who is slowly stepping away. It creates an imbalance she refuses to stay in. So she corrects it by pulling her effort back to match yours or even slightly below it. And this is where many men feel the change, but misinterpret it. They think she has become distant for no reason, but in reality, she is responding to the drop-in. Your consistency. She is protecting her self-respect, and more importantly, she is watching you. This stage is one of the clearest signals that something has changed, because effort is easy to notice when it disappears. The texts become less frequent. The enthusiasm fades. The little things she used to do stop happening, and suddenly you feel like you are the one carrying the interaction, and that shift can be uncomfortable because it forces you to confront your own level of investment. She is no longer compensating for your lack of effort. She is no longer making things easy for you, and that is intentional, because she wants to see if you will step up without being asked, if you will recognize the gap and fill it, and if you don't. She takes that as confirmation that her initial feeling was right, that your interest has faded, and that she should not continue investing at the same level. And the longer this goes on, the more she detaches, because effort is directly tied to emotion. When she stops putting in effort, it means she is slowly disconnecting from the outcome. She becomes more okay with things not progressing, more okay with distance, more okay with the idea of you not being consistent. And that acceptance is dangerous for the connection, because once she accepts less, she also expects less, and when expectations drop, emotional investment follows. She is no longer trying to build something strong with you. She is simply observing what remains, and at that point, even if you suddenly increase your effort, it doesn't hit the same way, because she is already adjusted to a lower standard. She has already convinced herself not to rely on you the same way, and rebuilding that lost momentum becomes much harder. Because now you are not just trying to show interest, you are trying to reverse a pattern she has already adapted to, and most men underestimate how powerful this stage is, because it looks calm on the surface. There is no drama, no confrontation. Just a quiet reduction in effort, but underneath that calm is a decision forming, a decision about whether you are still worth her time and energy, and if your actions continue to show inconsistency. She will finalize that decision without ever needing to explain it to you. She will simply continue pulling back until the connection fades naturally, and by the time you notice how much she has stopped chasing, she is already comfortable with the idea of letting you go. 6. Becomes indifferent. This is the stage most men never see coming because it doesn't look emotional. It looks calm, controlled, almost like everything is fine. But it's the exact opposite. When a woman reaches indifference, it means she has emotionally stepped back in a serious way. The reactions you used to get from her are gone. She no longer questions you, no longer gets bothered by your inconsistency, no longer tries to understand what you're doing or why you're acting different, and that silence is not peace. It is detachment. She has stopped investing emotionally in trying to figure you out, and instead she accepts you as you are without expecting anything more, and that is dangerous because expectations are what keep emotional connections alive. When she stops expecting effort, attention, or consistency from you, it means she is already adjusted to a version of you that doesn't fulfill her, and instead of fighting that reality, she becomes neutral toward it. Her responses become simple, direct. And without depth, she engages when you speak to her, but there is no energy behind it, no curiosity, no desire to extend the interaction. It feels like you are talking to someone who is present but not truly there. And that is exactly what is happening. She is physically or conversationally available, but emotionally checked out, and many men misread this as her being easygoing or unbothered, when in reality, she has just stopped caring enough to react. The things that used to trigger emotion in her, whether positive or negative, no longer have the same effect. She doesn't feel the need to chase clarity. She doesn't feel the need to test you. She doesn't even feel the need to pull back strategically anymore. Because she has already reached a conclusion in her mind that whatever connection you had is no longer strong enough to fight for. And once she reaches this point, her behavior becomes very consistent, but in the wrong way, consistently low effort, consistently neutral, consistently detached, and this is where the dynamic fully shifts, because now you are the one who starts noticing the lack. You feel the absence of her energy, her attention, her interest, and it creates a sense of distance that wasn't there before. And if you try to re-engage at this stage without real change, it feels ineffective because she is no longer emotionally responsive to small efforts. She has already adjusted to not expecting much from you, and that emotional wall she built is not easy to break. It was formed gradually through repeated moments where she felt your interest fading, and now it stands as protection, not against you specifically, but against investing in something that feels uncertain or one-sided. And here is the truth you need to understand. Indifference is not anger, it is not frustration. It is the absence of both. And that absence is what makes it so final. Because as long as a woman feels something, there is still a connection to work with. But when she becomes indifferent, that emotional connection has weakened to a point where rebuilding it requires significant effort and consistency, not temporary attention, not words, but a clear and steady shift in how you show up. And most men realize too late that indifference is not a phase, it is a result, the result of repeated inconsistency, reduced effort, and missed moments where she was still open to feeling something with you, and once she gets comfortable in that detached state, walking away no longer feels like a loss to her, it feels like a natural next step. 7. Moves on quietly. There is no big announcement, no emotional speech, no dramatic ending. She doesn't sit you down to explain everything she felt or everything that changed. She simply shifts her life in a direction where you are no longer a priority. And this is the part that catches most men off guard because they expect some kind of clear ending, some final sign that it's over. But with her, it happens in silence. She stops reaching out completely. She no longer checks in, no longer creates opportunities to see you, and if you do contact her, her responses feel distant, polite, and short, like you are no longer someone she is emotionally connected to. And that's because she has already done the emotional work of letting go before you even realized what was happening. All those earlier stages, the pulling back, the testing, the coldness, the reduced effort, the indifference, they were not random phases. They were steps she went through to detach herself gradually, so by the time she reaches this point, she is no longer conflicted, she is clear, she is calm, and she is done. And what makes this stage difficult for men is that it feels sudden, but for her it was a process. She gave herself time to adjust, to accept, to redirect her emotions. And now she is simply acting on that decision. She becomes focused on herself again, her routine, her goals, her social life, and you are no longer part of that focus. Not because she hates you, but because she no longer sees a reason to invest in something that didn't feel consistent. And here is where reality sets in. You start noticing her absence more than ever. The silence feels heavier. The lack of communication feels real. And when you try to step back in, it feels like you are dealing with a completely different person, because you are dealing with someone who has already moved forward mentally and emotionally, and your late effort doesn't create the same impact it would have earlier, because timing matters. Consistency matters, and she no longer feels the urgency to reconnect. She has already found stability without you, and that stability removes the emotional pull she once had toward you. And many men at this stage try to reverse everything quickly. They increase attention. They become more expressive. They try to bring back what was lost, but it often feels forced or too late because she is no longer in the same emotional space. She is not waiting for you anymore. She is not testing you anymore. she is. Not hoping you will change, she has already accepted that you didn't, and she adjusted her life accordingly. And this is the final shift you need to understand when a woman moves on quietly. It means she has fully processed the loss of the connection on her own, without needing closure from you, without needing validation from you. She gave herself the answer she needed through your actions, and once she reaches that level of clarity, she doesn't look back the same way. She keeps moving forward, steady, composed, and emotionally detached from what you once had. And by the time most men recognize this stage, they are no longer trying to understand her reactions. They are trying to figure out how they lost her completely. Not realizing that it wasn't one moment, it was a series of small shifts that led her to walk away without saying a word. By now, you can see that a woman doesn't just wake up one day and stop caring. It happens in layers, step by step, reaction by reaction. She feels the shift in you first, then she adjusts. She pulls back, tests, cools down, redirects her attention, reduces effort, becomes indifferent, and finally, she moves on without noise. None of this is random. It's a process driven by how she experiences your consistency, your presence, and your attention. What most men get wrong is waiting for something obvious, something loud, something they can clearly point to. But her real decisions are made quietly in moments you often overlook. A delayed reply, a lack of effort, a drop in attention. She notices all of it. And once those patterns repeat, she adapts in a way that protects her. If you're paying attention, every stage gives you a chance to correct your direction. When she pulls back, she's still watching. When she tests, she still cares. When she becomes colder, she's still open, just guarded. But once she reaches indifference, your window is almost closed. And when she moves on, it's already done. So understand this clearly, your actions speak long before your words ever do. If your interest is real, it has to show in consistency, not just moments. If it fades, she will feel it, and she will respond in ways that slowly remove you from her world. The difference between keeping her and losing her is not luck or timing. It's awareness and how you choose to show up when it actually matters.